Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. For me, that is the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. And I give my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Hello.
I'm talking to Nicola Morrish, who's the Director of Teaching and Learning for English at her school, which she'll tell you about. And they've been doing some great things with Microsoft Teams, I've heard.
Yes, yeah. So basically, yeah, it's a ridiculous title, but I'm an old-fashioned head of English. But we are a P-12 school in Geelong, and I work across 3 campuses. So I look after English for years 5 to 12. So
wow.
Quite a scope. Yeah, it is a bit of a wow. So look, we were really lucky the first time round in lockdown, because we, as a college, last year we started experimenting with Microsoft Teams as a platform regardless. Like, this was pre-COVID. We were using it to just sort of see if it could be a platform for some meetings between campuses. Various heads of faculties had success with that. And then we had a look at using it to have a class team where it kind of replaces your OneNote. So a lot of our teachers were using OneNote to store work, to share work with students. But we thought, well, this might be a cleaner approach, because one of the challenges I find with using Microsoft the OneNote is that it can be a little bit like a digital textbook. And I'm not a big fan of a textbook. I much prefer making the students think than giving them the answers. So this allowed us to actually provide a few resources without giving them too much. The real beauty of it was the use of assignments, because we could upload some documents, the kids have a go at it, we give feedback. So we had all that in place, and a few teachers were experimenting. So then, of course, lockdown happened. And we moved to that platform across the college. It wasn't easy, but it was doable because we had it in place.
Yeah.
So really the first few weeks in my role was, because I knew how to use it. I'm not an expert in ICT. We have people for that, and thank goodness they are amazing.
Yeah.
But it was getting teachers adjusted to using video, online, lessons, and how we can actually engage students through independent tasks and a little bit of teacher talk through the virtual lesson. But more than anything, that setting up tasks for students to work on that they could then upload through the class teams, rather than mess up all your emails and you lose track of everything, and give quick feedback.
How long did it take you to get the system up and running?
I would say teachers, well, all the work was done by our ICT crew in the background. My faculty had shifted to using Microsoft Teams last year, not for interaction with students. I led the way trialing. But as my faculty, we used Teams to basically to collaborate.
Yep.
Because we were trying to change the culture of the email chain.
Yep.
And we were trying to have conversations about resources, unit plans, assessment through Teams. Obviously, in person is the best option, but because we're across campus, because in education we're getting incredibly busy, it was a really efficient way of having the resources in one place, posting it in like a chat, talking about it, rather than post it as an attachment, you lose it, they can't find it. It took a while to shift the culture. So
how long did it take you to get everything online?
Well, it didn't take long. So my senior campus, because they've really been strong in the faculty use of the team, and they've been used to using OneNote, and a lot of them still are, they adapted pretty quickly. The middle school campuses took longer. So I would, in all, probably all of them, within the first 3 weeks, we were good. That first week for the middle school teams in particular was incredibly challenging because they hadn't really used the platform with students to find the balance of how long to talk in the lesson and how much to let the kids engage, for kids to actually be hands off and not be tempted to add a little note in the chat or unmute someone or mute someone. There was a fair bit of protocol. But again, as a college, the directors, the heads of campuses, they'd done a power of work really in the school holidays, setting up protocols. So we set things like your classic classroom norms. So that had to be where you said to your students, these are the rules, this is how we're going to use it. So I would say about 3 weeks, and we were all across the campus, up and running, feeling like we had control, getting work from kids, engaging with kids. Yeah.
And teachers made that pivot to online so fast.
Yeah. It was an incredible turnaround. And I would say teachers, and we all know this in education, we were exhausted by about halfway through because nobody had a holiday.
No, that's
what
right.
happened. It was that last week of term one. We went into lockdown. What we did at our school is we gave the kids that last, I think, the 3 days early holidays.
Yes,
so but all teachers, we were just straight into it, setting it up. But in my role, I was reading an awful lot of material. So I was engaging with colleagues about, okay, so we've got the platform, we've got this, but how do we engage these kids? And our mantra, my mantra, and a lot of my colleagues was less is more, less is more, less is more. So we did a lot of work to get that shift. And then, of course, when we went back to physical classrooms, we were all on our knees. Those holidays the last holidays couldn't come soon enough. So we did it very quickly. But then, of course, once you've got all that, as you've just said, it's how do we then engage these kids? And that's our challenge right now. Right now, we're finding, and in Geelong, we're better than, we're not better, we're in a better position than Melbourne because we've had a bit more face-to-face. But the kids are tired. Mental health is on the radar. It's about looking after our kids and just keeping them okay. With my director hat on, my big focus has been the Year 12s. We've got one for English, one last SAC. With VCAR updates all the time changing, it's what are we using for these predictive grades? We've been pushing the S as opposed to the level of achievement all year. That's been a big goal of mine as a director, to really try and change the mindset that everything should rely on the SAC. It actually shouldn't. Let's meet the learning outcomes. And that's helped because we shifted that prior to going into this. But the kids are tired right now.
Yeah. So with the younger one, how did you manage to get them to follow sort of the rules, about keeping yourself on mute or turning your camera on or not turning it off and running off to the fridge in the middle of a class, or any of the dozen things that occur?
The protocols helped. Because in years 5 to 9, the English teacher, whilst we have specialists, they generally teach another subject. So they're hitting the kids several times. It's relationships with parents. We did a lot of communication with parents. It was a lot of trial and error and just working with the kids and saying, this is what we need you to do, and having a bit of fun. One thing that worked really well was Wellbeing Wednesday, or Wellness Wednesday, which they've kept this time round for the 5 to 9 kids. So my daughter personally, she's in year 6. So today she had an English session. So they broke the day up into 3 sessions for 5 to 9. So you would have 3 contacts. But the idea was your video call really is only meant to be about 20 minutes. Then the teacher's still available, but you go away and do the task, and then you might jump in with a call with the teacher a little bit later. But a day like today, she started her day with a bit of English. She had work to do. She read to her teacher at one point, so that was beautiful. And now she's got the day to make sausage rolls. I think that was it, just sausage rolls and go for a walk. And, you know, there's a variety of activities that are the Wellness Wednesday. And they still this afternoon check in with their house group teacher, just to, you know, show the sausage rolls or whatever.
If you had to pick your two things that two most important things you learned through this process.
Okay, two most. Less is more, which I've talked about.
Yeah.
And communicating with my staff, but actually doing it as personably as I can through a Teams meeting. So regularly chatting with my teams, doing informal chats, setting up an optional, those two things. Yeah, just to keep my staff okay.
Yeah.
Because I teach one class. I teach my beautiful year 11s, and last time we were doing the Crucible, it was hard work.
Yeah.
But we got there. But my priority in my role was to work with my staff, support them, check in with them, give them what I could, and just keep saying to them, strip it back, strip it back.
And that I imagine that's a good thing to pass on to people outside of education, because they're not going. Nobody else other than teachers and schools. Higher ed's different because they're older. Has to manage all that stuff with hundreds of, you know, small children, small and medium-sized children. But outside of education, those learnings of how you manage your staff, how you work with your staff, those learnings are much broader than just education themselves.
Yeah, and it was the checking in, but it was as soon as we got back to school. It was the constant. So it was almost a weekly check up, check in. It felt like each week we were on a new journey and a new phase. So it was being with the staff through that, and then as soon as we hit the back to school again, it was okay. We've got this. We're now doing this, and here's that. And then we got to the holidays, and you know, something silly, but I bought out of my budget a coffee voucher, you know, a little coffee cake voucher for all my staff. As did a lot of my fellow directors. Just to say, look, this has been hard work. Go and have a holiday. I mean, our principal was fantastic the whole time. Wellbeing was up there, and he was really great at saying, go and have a holiday. Go and switch off.
Yeah.
We don't know what's coming next. We need to look after ourselves.
Nicola, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Thank you for those hints. That idea of managing your staff and having both the informal and also acknowledging the work they've put in.
Yeah, massive. And that was the real, you know, to see that for me is a real joy, because I love education. Yeah. I'm really passionate about empowering others in education. And to see people learning new things and just the light bulb, I could just do this little task and they're in. And that beautiful collaboration, that was gold. That made it. Yeah. And we're still seeing that. We're seeing the fruits of that, just the conversation that occurs and the sharing of resources and the excitement. So that's been excellent.
Thank you. That's awesome.
So, Salamata Tang, kia ora. I'm Dr. Michael Harvey from Marlborough College in Malaysia. For those who are users of Twitter, my Twitter handle is @Dr_Harves. And I'm just going to discuss briefly how the global pandemic, COVID-19, has impacted me as an educator. So I'm just going to break that down into 3 different sections. So the first thing I'll look at is well-being from a teacher's perspective. Then I'll discuss the extra workload associated with teaching during a pandemic, and also some positives actually from the overall process. So in terms of teacher well-being, I'm quite technically savvy. So I had a lot of resources already to go, and I had an understanding around lesson design before beginning the process of remote learning. But even then, my well-being did suffer. I was in lockdown for 2 months by myself, which was quite emotionally draining. And it was very difficult to connect with other people, only electronically. So it was important actually that at that particular time, I had a global PLN I could connect with, of global teachers who I could share my frustrations with online through Twitter primarily. So that was important for my well-being. The second point was extra workload. So even though I had the resources rearing to go, I did have to cater to my classrooms, and that required a lot more effort in terms of lesson design, because teaching face-to-face is very much different to the process of remote learning. It's definitely a different form of pedagogy. And I guess that was another point that a lot of senior leadership tended to think, well, all you have to do is move your face-to-face lessons onto an online platform, and that'll be that. But that's where I think we put the technology before the pedagogy. We didn't really focus on the pedagogy of online learning as being distinct from face-to-face learning, and that required an extra amount of workload, which again affected my well-being. In terms of some positives, looking at the positives, it was those global connections and the power of those global connections to connect with global educators to kind of tease out how best to teach our learners and get some advice around that. And also another positive was the fact that I had time for reflection, even though I was pretty much online from 7 a.m. in the morning till about 7 p.m. in the evenings for my classes, by preparing lessons and giving feedback. The fact I could individually give feedback to learners, I thought was a positive. It kind of slowed things down, because during the process, we went from a process of completely synchronous lessons to a mixture of asynchronous and synchronous lessons. So again, it was about lesson design. So it was again pulling back the content in the synchronous lessons, so little 10-minute bites, and the students being more collaborative online rather than focusing on content, which I found was a positive. And in that regard as well, the ability for me as an educator to provide more direct and personalized feedback, I felt was a positive. And those things are the things that I will look forward to moving on with once we get back to face-to-face lessons. I mean, at the moment, what's going to happen in my new school here, it will be basically a blended learning model. I'll have some students online, some students face-to-face, and I'll try in some way to combine those. Again, linking to extra workload, but we go forward and we learn from this experience and can become better educators and improve the outcomes for our learners. So those are just some of my perspectives as an educator dealing with the current crisis as it continues to pop up as the second wave comes.
Now speaking with Kenny Ong, who is a middle school science and biology teacher at Penley and Essendon Grammar School in Melbourne's north. Kenny, you when we spoke the other day, you mentioned the difficulty when you're working online with remote teaching and learning, the difficulty in separating your work from your home, and the way that translates into the emotional and psychological well-being of both the staff and the students. That's something that I think everybody would be interested in. Not everybody has students, but most businesses and government departments have staff. So those that is an important thing, perhaps. Can you tell me what you meant by that?
So I think in general, the sense I get from that is that as a teacher ourselves, right, there is no such thing as downtime or uptime when you're teaching, because a lot of times you have to bring work home. Your deadlines are there's no set deadline, so to say. It's a lot of self-motivated work. So a lot of times when people say, "Oh, teachers have holidays," I'm like, yes, we have holidays, but those holidays are blurry.
Yeah.
When I mentioned about blurry, there's no such thing as saying, "Oh, I'm off work." we are thinking about students all the time. We're thinking about what's next. What do we plan for our next lesson? Even during the holidays, when we go out for a holiday, for example, a vacation, it's not that we can do that now. You know, you'll be thinking about, oh, I'm like, for example, for myself, I'm a biology teacher. I go out and I go to a special place and I see all these beautiful flowers and I go, oh, this will be perfect for biology, and I'll take photos for it. So you see that blurriness in the way a teacher's life is. You realize that every day is a teaching and learning experience, and you capture them. And now in the remote learning environment, I mentioned to you, Carolyn, in our LinkedIn conversation, that it's even more blurry now because we are at home and teaching. There is no physical separation or geographical separation between our place of work and our home. So a lot of times, it's both an affordance and a curse, so to say. Affordance because I can be very authentic with my students. It gives the sense that we're all in this together. My students feel like, you know, the teachers are kind of understand where they're coming from when they're kind of saying they're stuck at home, because your teachers are also stuck. You know, so there's that line of relationship building. But on the other hand, it's also about having to manage things that you take for granted. For example, internet connection. You know, in Australia, I wrote a reply to one of the LinkedIn posts about teachers and our struggles. You know, Australia has one of the worst internet in the world, and I'm currently struggling with my partner and arranging to ensure that when I run my classes, my partner is not in the middle of a meeting. So that we don't, you know, so there's a whole home and work is now coming together, because I have to ensure that my partner knows when I'm working. And in school, you don't have to worry about that. There's no need to negotiate with somebody at home your work times. So a lot of times you will go like, okay, so what's your plan today? Oh, you've got to use mobile teaching, or I will have to use mobile teaching for our lessons. So that's where you see the blurriness. And then things like meals as well, or washing of the dishes. You know, little things like this that we take for granted. Sometimes we pack our lunch to school. We'll just, okay, my lunch is in the fridge and stuff. But now it's more like, oh, I got to factor in time. I need to cook. I think it's the whole immediacy, the whole. I mean, right now with social media, you know, the youth of today, how they are exposed to social media, and the whole the immediate gratification, the whole phenomena of that instancy, right? The quickness of the response, and even online as well. The students, interestingly, that's also kind of contradictory, because in class, some of my students are telling me they can get the immediate feedback that they need in class. But now when you're online, it's very tough to do that, especially with the whole democracy of the screen. The democracy, the quieter students can no longer be kind of quiet. And the noisy students are now having to quieten themselves because they have to realize that they can't speak over the crowd. Or you can't hear anything at all on the screen. So it's a very, very interesting dynamic at the moment. And you're noticing that it has its affordances, but at the same time, it also has its challenges.
So working with other staff, how do you think, what are the lessons you've learned from this period in relation to how you function or how you manage as a teacher and a member of a school community?
I think I always go with this sentence: everything lives and dies by leadership. And in order for the organization to thrive, leadership has to be strong. Leadership needs to make very challenging decisions about how we interact with each other, the processes that are needed to be put in place, the policies that are required to be put in place. Like, for example, at what we're doing in Penley and Essendon Grammar School at the moment at the middle school is we have instituted what we call refresh lessons, meaning one lesson per day is put aside so that the students can get off the screens. And it's also a time for staff to have some downtime. So staff like myself, if we are teaching 5 periods a day, we could potentially have 1 period off and we can take a breather after being on screen for more than like 3 hours or 4 hours. So we get that breather. So I think it's if we were to translate such ideas to the corporate world and businesses, leadership in those corporate businesses need to be very daring to put in place very structured processes and procedures in place to say, okay, that's it. This is the time. You need to get off your screen. You need to stop work at this point.
Yeah.
Encourage us enough to do that, which is what we did with the students. And I think it can be translated across industries as well.
Yeah. What processes, or apart from that one, has PEG put in place for supporting teachers, and also working on the communication between staff?
So what we've done is there has been an increase, of course, with the Andrews government as well, putting in what you call pupil-free days. We've converted those into staff planning days. So staff actually have time to connect with their colleagues and find out, okay, where are we at in terms of our work?
Yeah.
I think on one hand, because PEG is very well resourced in terms of its technological tools to begin with. Even before we went into lockdown, our learning management system is highly advanced. We've got the Google Suite, we've got OneDrive, Office 365. So a lot of these collaboration tools are already there waiting to be exploited.
Yeah.
And then when we went to lockdown, we were using lots of Google documents and collaborating online. So while we are talking to each other like that, somebody else is on the screen and typing in and stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of collaboration taking place. We also have what we call weekly check-ins with our year-level leaders. So we have a chance to actually just go in 10 minutes before school starts, just to say hi, have a bit of a connection, how you're going the week, and then that's it, you continue with your day. Yep. So we get the connection. I can safely say for my department in science, we also, like my coordinator, she makes the effort to arrange specific times to meet specific staff. Yep. To help them with things. Like for myself, when I started at PEG, I started in the remote environment. I had not met any of my students in person when I joined. So then the moment I joined, first day of term 2, I was into remote.
Wow.
So that was very, very challenging. But because the processes were in place by leaders to say, okay, we're going to meet at this specific time every week. We're going to have a catch up. I'm going to walk you through what you're supposed to do in class, for example, because I'm completely new. The curriculum is new to me, So, I mean, as I cannot imagine how tough it would have been. I'm an experienced teacher of more than 10 years. I have colleagues who had just joined the school, gone into remote, and had just graduated from teaching school.
Yeah.
I have no idea the amount of grit and gumption they have.
Yeah.
Is extraordinary, really. How they've just went through all these challenges without complaining, always keeping their mood up. Every time you see them on screen, they're going like, okay, tell me, what do we do? What do we do next?
Yeah.
The kind of gumption and grit is just amazing.
And enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's been quite a lot of talk in the many social medias that teachers have used to build professional learning networks. A lot of discussion around the whole idea of wellness, and how important that is for staff members or for teachers or people to be able to keep going through this. Can you talk a little bit about how you see that happening or not happening?
Again, with every situation, there will always be the affordances and the challenges. I think wellness for teachers, or well-being in general for staff, I mean, we cannot deny the fact that we will never, with this online environment, we don't have what all humans crave: physical touch, or physical presence, even proximity to other humans. I think that's an important thing. I think we have a lot of, I mean, like for my year level leader, she has sent out care packs for us homeroom teachers, just to make us create that connection, and we're doing little things together as a staff. Like we would come into we use Google Meet. We'll come into a Google Meet and we have something called Spirit Week. And we'll come in as different characters. We'll dress up. Yeah. There'll be also community activities, like we have house activities. So the latest thing would be the house talent quest that we're about to go ahead with. So the students organize this, but staff are involved So for example, we will be dancing at home. So I think the whole idea of being part of something bigger helps with well-being, that you're not alone in this together. I myself am also arranging to have a facial mask party with the towels on the heads with my girls in the morning. So we'll all come in with our face masks on with towels and be like, okay, this is a wellness morning for us to kind of just sit back and relax with our face masks.
Yeah.
So I think it's about being innovative, but ultimately the elephant is still the elephant is still in the room. We still do not have physical proximity. We still do not have the chance to connect at a table, even though we are socially distanced.
Yeah,
there is that human connection going on, that face to face. Yeah.
Yeah, I often looking back have thought that the most important thing for a teacher to be functioning well is a good staff room. The connections, the ongoing professional conversations that you just have, because people don't, go to a lunchroom or a canteen because there's no time. Often you're eating at your desks. But if you have a supportive staff room, it just makes the days so much easier. But without
all the wayside chats.
Yeah, it's all of those. If you have a bad staff room, life is hard. And having no staff room, I think is probably harder.
And I really think it's also the whole, in a sense, we talk about instant gratification. When you have you have colleagues who are physically present next to you. So I'll talk about my previous time in Kyungwon International. That's my previous school in Term 1, and for 2 years, I would be in the same staff room with a very supportive member of staff, Lynn. Both of us were year level leaders. So she was in charge of year 9, I was in charge of year 10, and our jobs were tough. But because we were next to each other, we would always be like, we will come in and we'll be in a huff and like, oh my God, we have to deal with this challenge. And then she and I would have this single signal. We'll do this on our faces. This is our listening face. And we just sit there and listen. And the whole idea now with the remote learning thing is the kind of effect it has on our family members as well at home.
Yeah.
Because we don't have fellow staff who we can commiserate with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Understand our context. We can tell that to our partner or our wife or our husband or our children, but they will never really truly understand where we are coming from.
No, and it's not necessarily something they should have to understand where you're coming from. I mean, I've known teaching couples who've managed it, but on the whole, I think they have their own work to be worried about.
Yeah.
I suppose if it's a
teacher.
Sorry, go on.
Yeah. No, I'm just thinking about the ramifications on people's relationships as well, because there's been I laugh about it. Common stereotypes. Teachers don't like to be taught at. They always say that teachers are the worst students. That's the stereotype. And sometimes you have a whinge, or you just have a go or a whinge about a situation. You're not asking for advice.
No.
And let's say if you have a partner who wants to give you, maybe you should do this and that, it's potentially damaging to your relationship.
Yeah, because you just need to be, another teacher will understand that you just want to offload and will stick a chocolate bar under your, on your desk, or make you a cup of coffee with it, and nobody needs to say anything. But if you have to take that home and then somebody thinks they need to fix everything, that could be really difficult. Just before we finish, is there, you're obviously using the Google Suite a lot?
Yes, we are.
Are there other, does the Google Suite give you everything you need as far as to teaching and communicating, or are there other tools that you also use?
Of course, this is software. We also need to rely on hardware. A lot of it depends on our students having their own devices. So we are a Mac school. So I have bought myself an iPad Pro, so that I personally bought one so that I could teach my classes more fluidly.
Yep.
We also use Office 365, so all my work is saved on the cloud. So in the past, what would happen is I never bring my work laptop home. Of course, now it's in front of me, I'm using it.
Yeah.
But I never bring my work laptop home because everything's on the cloud, and I'll just work off the cloud on my home computer. And I'm prepared for the next day because everything is downloaded from the cloud.
So is that OneNote?
Yes, OneNote. So OneDrive.
OneDrive. And is that the Mac one, or is that the Google the Microsoft?
No, Mac Drive.
One?
It's Microsoft. Yeah. So Google is more for my students to do collaborative work like and it's powerful because we can track whether they are doing their work.
Right. They use Apple hardware and Microsoft software as the main combination.
Kind of, and Google as well.
And course. Google as well.
Yeah.
It's a lot, isn't it?
I know, but I think that the whole key to this is also the fact. I think companies in general need to keep thinking ahead, and keep thinking ahead, innovating, and think about what's going to happen next rather than be set in what's happening now.
Yeah.
So once this whole lockdown period is over, what's next? When you go out, are you going to return back to the normal office working environment? I sure hope not, especially if we've got a virus going around. Constantly being ahead of the curve. Let's just put it that way. So I think for PACS, what they've done is that they've already set up all these processes in place, so that when something unexpected happens, we're ready for it. We could do it. And the students are used to doing that. So it's nothing novel to them. It's just a change of the mode, but the basis of it, how you manage your resources, how you interact through email, etc., it's all there.
Yeah. Thank you very much for your
Thanks,
time.
Carolyn.
Thank you.
I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land in which I work, the Wathaurong people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging.
Today I'm talking with Angela Tutty. Angela is the Director of Teaching and Learning for the Humanities at a large 3-campus school. Angela, what I wanted to ask you is, what's the best thing that has come out of this COVID situation for you?
We've seen a lot of things from different teachers depending on where they are in their teaching practice. A lot of our young teachers, because they're often more confident with using their computers, have stepped up and have taken leadership roles to then be leading their peers and showing the way. But with all of us, I think we've all had to sit and look at our teaching practice and work out what works and what doesn't work, and had to work a lot harder perhaps to get students motivated. In a classroom, I don't have any problem reading where students are at through their body language and their looks on their faces, or them telling me, whereas that's quite different in a situation where you're working with computers. So I've had to work on thinking about how can I motivate my students and keep their interest up when often they're really tired and I might be at the end of the day and they've had 2 other teachers before me and they might have been in really long sessions. So we've had to evaluate what's the most important thing that we are teaching. And I remember many years ago being in a workshop with 2 guys, a theorist from Australia and a practitioner from America, and they said, well, you divide the curriculum into 3 parts. Yeah, the part that's great, but you don't really need it. The part that's quite relevant, but we can do without. And then there's the last third that is the most important stuff, and that's what we need to learn. And so a lot of it's come down to, it's not about the content, it's about how we get the content across. Yep. And looking at what's the most important thing, and very much moving back into those soft skills, which of course the students are going to need when they go into the workforce.
Yeah. How many you work with the humanities? Do you want to just outline what the humanities are for
Yes.
non-educators?
Okay, so the humanities it's life. It's what it's all about. It's going back into the deep dark history from the beginning of time right up till modern day, and so we've got that section. We've got our geographers, which are very much about looking after this earth. And the thing I see with geography, it's a subject that's very much about we can make changes. I mean, we can't change history. We can be aware of history and we can ensure it doesn't happen in the future. But with geography, we can definitely make changes. And very much that's about, especially with our younger students, is teaching them to be aware of the issues in the world. And what does that mean for them to be a global citizen? You don't get to say, I'm interested in refugees, because this is a world problem and we need to step up and take responsibility. And then our final section is our commerce section, which is very much about business, economics, accounting, business management, and also our legal side. Politics, yeah, with politics we have global politics at year 12, which is great for those students who like that stuff that's really heavy, but it's here, it's happening, it's evolving daily. Yeah, so a broad range, therefore it means we get a broad range of teachers, which I think is really healthy. And it's at the beginning of the year when we were analysing our results from last year, and I had all the different facets of the faculty there, how are we going to make a difference before COVID-19 hit us? And across the board, it didn't matter whether we were teaching global politics or whether we were teaching accounting. It was the same thing in every subject. We need to work on vocab. Our students need to understand the verbs. What are we going to do? We're finding when they get to year 12, they haven't got enough language. And even though we're at the start of every unit, we look at the vocabulary. Clearly for some staff, they're not teaching it explicitly enough. So then we went back and so with every new unit of work that we've written, we have identified what the verbs are, what they're asking, what the explicit skills are, and I've highlighted them in the unit so the teachers can see what they actually have to teach the students. So I think it's really interesting when we're very different throughout our faculty. I mean, accounting's, it's a subject with figures, which is quite different than dealing with history. Yeah, we have some figures, they're called dates. But yeah, it's a different ball game. So it's exciting to work with so many different types of teachers. But I guess the biggest problem for the humanities faculty, and this is every humanities faculty I've worked in across the world, often it's a fill-in for teachers.
Yeah.
And so we don't always get experts in the subject at our top senior level. So from years 10 through to 12, we do get all experts. But for a lot of teachers, it's their second and third subject. So it kind of falls down the ranking a wee bit, which is really sad. And of course, the government now has made it extremely difficult. So that's going to mean that we're going to need to work a lot harder to show kids that humanity, it's the way of the world. Yep. We can't pretend it's not there because it's always going to be there.
The humanities are what teaches us to be human, I would have thought. Can you speak to that as a and how you teach students to think outside of their content area?
I think very much with the humanities, especially with our littlies, we have to start with who am I? Where do I fit in this world?
Yeah.
So I'm originally from New Zealand, and so we would talk about our whakapapa, our ancestors. Who has gone before us, and what's the impact of how that happens in our lives? And by doing that, if the students understand where they come from and where they fit in this world, and that's part of the problem, is that sometimes when you live in such a beautiful country like Australia, you've got this beautiful place where life's pretty good and it's cruisy and you get nice weather. Yeah, but where does Australia fit in the world? You know, how does, okay, we know that they were colonised by England, but what's our responsibility as human beings to care for others? And being at a Christian school, I mean, that's the whole part of our ethos, is that we are there to have empathy for others and to help where we can. So for our students, we teach through a Christian lens, and we get them to look. We have a specific subject at Year 9 that we've just introduced this year, which is really exciting, called Worldviews.
Oh, nice.
So very much in our Christianity, we're teaching our Christian perspective, and our science, we're teaching a science perspective. We now get to bring in the worldviews of the human being. And so looking at what is their worldview, well, most 15-year-olds have absolutely no idea. Who influences that worldview? And can we change it? And we know as adults, yeah, we can, and we have evolved over life, but you don't see that when you're 15.
No.
You're in your own little teenage bubble and just doing what you want to do. And so teaching them to look beyond themselves, their family, you know. I use a beautiful thinking routine that says, and I give them an image, and it could be of anything. I've used refugee boats, I've used taking images of countries where you've got beautiful lush ground on one side and then you've got rubbish on the other side, anything like that, any issue. We do a lot of issue teaching right from Year 5, getting them to look at the issues that affect them, and that could be in your community. So using routines where you ask things like, why might this matter to me? Why might this matter to my family? Why might this matter to the world? So that the students start to see that they are part of a global world.
Yep.
And how we have to work together. You know, climate change won't change with just one country doing it. We need every country in the world to step up and take responsibility and say, right, well, we're going to put in some wind farms and we're going to do that. So lots and lots of issue teaching and just getting students to be aware of what's happening here in Australia, as well as what's happening in the whole world. And this, at the moment, we're trying to really build our Indigenous focus, so that I find a lot of students have this really attitude, oh, we've already learned about that, it's really, really boring. But we need to change that. We need to go back to the earth. We need to, I love that when you see Adam Goods and he goes back to his country and he puts his feet in the earth, and that incredible experience of being part of the land. And where I come from, that's what we believe. We are the tangata whenua, we are the people of the land, and therefore we have to look after our land.
I going back to something you said before about on virtual, the remote teaching and learning, and how you keep what you do to keep the students motivated or engaged with their learning. And I'm thinking that would have applications outside of education, wouldn't it? For anyone who's managing a staff, for instance.
I mean, it's a different world when we're working from home. And some of us, I even know in my household, I am really driven. I'm really focused. I can switch the whole world off and I can get on and I can do what I've got to do, and people can interrupt me and I can still go back to what I'm doing. Whereas with my husband, he doesn't tend to be quite as focused. He ducks off and listens to a song or something like that. And I think that's because we're all driven differently. We approach things differently. So that's the same with our kids. And it's very much about using the asynchronous and the synchronous kind of learning. The learning that we do together and the learning that we do on our own. And some students need more motivation. I've found that some of the things I've had to do is put in extra steps. So I believe in short, sharp lessons. So that the students will work with me, we'll do a short, sharp lesson, We'll be on whatever topic is. They already know because they've got a module, so that it's clear on what's happening and where we're heading. They know what their assessment is, and then they will spend some time with us. We'll do some kind of thinking, some sharing, sometimes in groups. We have breakout rooms. Sometimes we do it in the chat, depending on the level of students. I find that students are a lot more eager to type in the chat, whereas when you're working with adults, they're way much more fun to work with because they actually were prepared to put their faces on the screen and are quite happy to talk to you. And I guess it's that social thing. So yeah, and then giving them something to go and do that they've got to go away and do by themselves. Yeah. And then I always sit around and wait for the students to come back, and some students will come back and ask you questions. So I think in any field that you work in, you've got to tailor it to meet the needs of those who are in front of you, whether you're working with adults or whether you're working with students. Because everyone's different. Everyone comes with different experiences and also with how they're motivated. And this actually gets harder, not easier. It's easier to teach the second time, but it's harder to keep the motivation going and keeping the students focused. And all of that's got a lot to do with the media and what's happening around them, and if they're listening, and we don't know how long we're going to be in this for. Yeah, a lot of unknowns, I think, at the moment.
Any particular tools, e-learning tools that you have found that are really helpful, or ones that you've found that are really not?
Yes, I don't use it myself, but I know of other teachers who are doing a very much a lecture style teaching, where they are just talking at the kids. And that's really the good thing about remote learning, is you can actually shut your microphone off, you can shut your camera off, and you can not engage in the lesson whatsoever. And the important thing was at the start that we culled our curriculum, that we cut it back to the most important stuff, what we had to do, how we were going to drive it, and some people haven't done that. The best thing I've done, and I still think this is the best thing that's ever happened to in my teaching career, of all the techniques I use, visible thinking routines, I think, are the best, because the thing I love about them is that it differentiates straight away, because some students think deeper than others, but the opportunity is there to think at that lower level, to lift it up, and then continually questioning, continually being prepared to ask questions if you don't understand, or if you want to know more, and like building that curiosity in the students. Visible thinking routines give us that opportunity. So on a normal day, what I would do would be to use a video clip or some images, or do some reading, do some talking about topics, and then there would be a technique that I use, and I've started to meld them now, I sort of create my own, that gets the students to think to that higher level, which of course then when they reflect in their writing, they start to drive deeper. And I've really noticed in my history class, so it's a Unit 1 and 2 class, that I've got a mix. I've got mainly Year 11s, but I have 4 Year 10s in there. And a couple of the students at the start of the year they were just struggling to understand, and we were teaching the interwar years, so they all have done World War I and World War II, but really struggling to take that next step up and be able to work at that level. I look at what those students are producing now, and they are thinking to a much higher level. They're getting much depth in their writing, and so I don't think you can ever go wrong. And I actually read an article that said exactly that the teachers that were using the visible thinking routines found it so much easier to go into remote learning than the teachers that were not using them. I guess because the habits are already in place, the kids are going to know that's how the lesson's going to roll, that you're going to be making them think and give their opinion and justify their opinion And I mean, that's what they need to do. They need to have an opinion about what's happening, and otherwise we'll never see change.
No.
I did a great activity last term, set the students up, made breakout rooms, did the invites, told the students what groups they would be in, set up these beautiful questions. And I thought, oh, I better put it in a graphic organizer just to be safe, to show the students what they need to work through. So off they went, they had their sheets that they downloaded, went into their breakout rooms. And so I went through the breakout rooms, and I had 5 breakout rooms. One was going exceptionally well. The other 4, the students were so busy filling in the form that they weren't doing the discussion.
Yeah.
So I said, okay, let's put the form away, and let's do look at the questions, and let's do the discussion, because that's what I want to get out of it. So I think we've had to learn to adapt far more quicker than what we would have in the past.
Yep.
I mean, we've always had to adapt in a classroom with the changing environment, but I think with this, you've got to be really prepared to give things. A teacher I'm mentoring today, I spoke with her and I said, okay, this is what I think you should do. You could try this, or you could try this, or you can try this, and don't think that if it works this week, it's going to work again next week. You might have to adapt it again, but try different techniques. And I guess one of the things that's come out of this is that people are talking more about their teaching practice.
Yeah.
And talking about, well, this worked for me, or this worked for me, or I might try. Like, someone's told me that they had been using a Kahoot, and I'm not a great lover of Kahoots, but I thought, oh, well, I'll give it a go. And we used Teams, and I put it up in the assignment feature, told the students it was there, sent them the thing. They weren't interested.
Yeah.
So, okay, I tried it, didn't work. I'll go back to the way that, and I think that's it. It's got to be a bit of trial and error. And
I imagine, sorry, go on.
I think that's probably where a lot of the tiredness comes into, the draining of, you're always having to be on your top game. And I guess, every teacher as they enter the classroom has to be a bit dramatic and
Yep.
do their drama performance, regardless of what subject we're teaching. I think our drama performance is way more than what it would be in a classroom.
Yeah, and I think that's something that managers and directors of businesses need to keep in mind when they're working with their remote staff, that they don't expect them to be able to manage the same amount of things in the same way as you would in the office. When
there's no way that you can do as much, and everything takes longer. And then when you're asking people to think and justify their thoughts, there's a whole lot of sitting around in these pauses, which can get quite uncomfortable. But you just got to learn to be uncomfortable, because the students need to have time to think about what they're going to write. And I even know sometimes when I'm participating in a chat, I start writing something and then I think, oh no, that's not very good. And then I'll reword it, which is quite good, because you get to have a second go. You don't always get to have that when you open your mouth.
No.
So you've got to be prepared that you are going to have to do less, and what does that look like, and is that possible? And I know certainly at year 12 that the teachers have really struggled with that, and in workplaces, if you've got deadlines to meet, how do you? And I find the pressure. I really have to prioritise what are the jobs that I have to do, that I've got to get done by this date, and then what can I let slide so that I to manage my workload.
Thank you, Angela. I just want to say thank you for your time and for your reflections on what has been a very strange and interesting process for everyone.
I sat in a webinar at the very beginning of version 1, and a wise person in that webinar said, never waste a good crisis. So I hope out of all of this, we get to see some change.